So let's talk about doing an in-place migration of CloudBees Jenkins platform to CloudBees CI. Here's our starting point. I have a CloudBees Jenkins Operations Center. It's version 2.346.4.1. Attached to this controller, I have a single client controller, and again, its version is also 2.346.4.1. Now, these version numbers are really important. When we do the in-place upgrade from CloudBees Jenkins platform to CloudBees CI, we want to keep the same version number on CloudBees CI as we're running on CloudBees Jenkins platform. So we'll have to be careful when we do the installation to make sure that we install that same version. Now, whether you're doing an in-place upgrade like we're doing in this video, or you're doing some other type of upgrade, the very first step that you want to do is you want to back up your Jenkins home directory. Now, for this video, let's assume for a moment that I have already done that backup. Now, in our setup today, I'm running Alma Linux 8, which is a Fedora-based distribution. So one of the first things that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make sure that we've got all of the information that we're going to need based on whether it's a Fedora, Red Hat, CentOS, whatever. Those are going to be the instructions that we're going to be looking for. Right now, I'm SSH'd in to my Operations Center. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is I want to shut down the service that's running. Now, in my case, that service name is Jenkins OC. So I'm going to say systemctl stop Jenkins OC. And if we take a look at our process list, right now we don't have any Java processes running. If it was still running, then we would need to go ahead and force stop that process. The other step that I'm going to go ahead and do, so I don't accidentally do a reboot and have this process start back up, is I'm going to go ahead and explicitly disable Jenkins OC service. That way, in case the instance gets rebooted, that service doesn't restart, because once we go through this upgrade process, this service should never be restarted again. Now, there is documentation for this process. The links for that documentation is down in the description. But if we take a look at specifically right now, migrating an operations center from CloudBees Jenkins platform to CloudBees CI, we've done step one, which is stopping the service. The next up is installing the operations center for CloudBees CI. Now, if we take a look at that documentation, what we're going to see is we'll pick CentOS Fedora. It's going to take us off to the same section. And we're going to make sure, number one, ensure that you have met the appropriate hardware and software requirements. Now, why am I doing an in-place upgrade? With an in-place upgrade, what that means is I'm going to keep the Jenkins home directory in the same location as it was before. I'm also going to be using the same user ID that I was using from CloudBees Jenkins platform. That also means probably I'm not having any performance issues and I'm not needing to upgrade hardware. In other words, everything has been running fine and normal on this piece of hardware that I'm using. So therefore, in-place upgrades are a valid way to go ahead and do the upgrade. If for some reason you've been running into constraints or you're just wanting to move to new hardware, in-place might not be your right long-term solution, but it might be a waypoint until you get to the point to where you can get new hardware and expand your installation footprint. The second point is make sure you've met all the JVM requirements. At this point, since we're running 2.346.4.1, I already have Java 8 running. Now, because I'm going from 2.346 to 2.346, and I'm not changing the hardware, then there's nothing else to check because I'm going to still be using the exact same JVM that I was running for CloudBees Jenkins platform as I will be running for CloudBees CI. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add the package manager. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste that in. Now I'm already logged in as root, so the sudo was sort of redundant, but now we have the repository that we're going to need for CloudBees CI. If we go to the next step, we need to add the key. So I'm going to copy this key and paste it in. And then step 5 here says you should go ahead and do a DNF upgrade. I'm not going to worry about that for mine right now. But then this step 6 is really, really important. What we want to do is we want to say, since I'm on Alma Linux, I'm going to use DNF install CloudBees Core OC. But because I want to install a specific version, I must include that version with the DNF install. So if we go back over to our shell, I'm going to paste in the DNF install, CloudBees Core OC dash, and the version that I want to install. And that version matches the version that we're currently running in our Operations Center. Now my Operations Center is down, but I'm actually on the controller with this. We can see that this is 2.346.4.1. Going back to our shell, we've got 2.346.4.1. So let's go ahead and hit enter and let the installation process complete. And since I didn't give it a -y, it's asking Are you sure this is the one you want? And again, I'm verifying with the version that I'm doing 2.346.4.1. Now, if you're upgrading for a version that doesn't match that, make sure whatever you're upgrading to matches the version that you're coming from. That's the key part here. Make sure those two match. So in my case, this is correct. I'm going to say yes and hit enter. Okay, at this point, everything has been installed. Let's see if it's running. So I'm going to do ps aux ww. I'm going to go to grep for Java. And we can see here that CloudBees Core OC has started. We can see that specifically from here, userlib CloudBees Core OC, CloudBees Core OC war. So before we do anything else, we need to go ahead and stop this because we need to go ahead and reconfigure this process to point at our existing Jenkins home and also update the user ID to run as, because we want to still use the same user ID as before, which in this case was Jenkins-OC. So we'll go ahead and say systemctl stop CloudBees Core OC. So what are those changes that we need to make? Well, we talked about Jenkins home, we talked about the user ID, but there may be some other ones that we need to set. So the best way to do this, in my case, since I'm running on a Fedora-based system, is I need to compare my etc sysconfig for both Jenkins-OC and CloudBees Core OC. So we're just going to do a diff. So I'm going to say clear, and I'm going to paste in my diff of etc sysconfig Jenkins-OC against etc sysconfig CloudBees Core OC. And what we can see here, we'll work our way from the bottom up. We can see in the Jenkins-OC, I had a value for Jenkins args that I'm going to need to migrate forward to the CloudBees Core OC sysconfig. We see a lot of comments, so we can ignore the comments. We'll keep going up here a little bit more. Okay, we also have a Java Jenkins options. This one is from my Jenkins-OC, so I'm going to need to move this forward to the CloudBees Core OC, but also notice here, I was specifying the temp dir. I was pointing it at varcache Jenkins-OC. Well, I'm going to want to change that to varcache CloudBees Core OC. So even when I move this over, I might have to make a change to this, and in fact, I am going to have to make a change to this one. Let's go and scroll up a little bit more. We're going to want to change the Jenkins user because we want to keep all the permissions in place because we're not moving our Jenkins home. So we're going to take our Jenkins user, which was Jenkins-OC, and replace it into CloudBees Core OC. This will make more sense as we go through it. And then finally, as we move up just a little bit further, what we're going to see is our Jenkins home. So we're going to change our Jenkins home from CloudBees Core OC to Jenkins-OC in order to keep it in place. Again, right now, everything is about keeping everything in place. So let's go ahead and edit our etc sysconfig CloudBees Core OC. So number one, we know we need to do our Jenkins home. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to Jenkins-OC. Now you might be asking, well, why don't you just replace CloudBees Core OC with just Jenkins-OC everywhere? And I don't want to do that because I need to be able to pick some of these things out because I do want to go ahead and take advantage of the varcache CloudBees Core OC. So I don't want to change anything wholesale. I just want to change things in specifics. So I'm going to say insert Jenkins-OC and fix that. Okay, good. We'll go ahead and go down a little bit more. We will come back and do user at the end because there's a few more things that I want to call out specifically about that. We'll keep going down to Jenkins Java options. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and remove this to the end. And I'm going to paste in the values that existed in the etc sysconfig Jenkins-OC. Now you'll also notice, because I called out when it was running, varcache Jenkins-OC now becomes varcache CloudBees Core OC. Now because I know the only other thing that I need to add in here at the bottom is the Jenkins args, I'll go ahead and go in here and add in my -- plugin root. Now again, previously this value was varcache Jenkins-OC, but now I want it to be in CloudBees Core OC. So I've got plugin root. Now we're ready to go back and work with our user. So let's take a look at the comments that are around the user section here. Now first off, we'll go ahead and just change this to Jenkins-OC. Now let's look at all of the different things that we're going to have to make changes to. We're going to need to update the ownership of our Jenkins home directory, varlog CloudBees Core OC, varcache CloudBees Core OC. Think about it for a moment. Plugin root is pointing at varcache. Our temp dir is also pointing at varcache. We need to update etc sysconfig, and then we also need to update user bin CloudBees Core OC. All of these are going to be changing to use our new user ID, which in this case is Jenkins-OC. Now, since I'm also controlling this service using systemd, I'm going to need to create an override file by using systemctl edit CloudBees Core OC and also specify that user. So once we save this file, we need to go in, change the ownership, and create that systemctl override file. So let's go ahead and do that. We've already made the change to Jenkins-OC here. We'll go ahead and quit out of this. So save quit. Let's run our diff one more time. And in this case, our diff is true for this Jenkins args, but everything is fine. We're just moving our Jenkins OC to CloudBees Core OC because we want to use the new var cache for CloudBees Core OC. If we go up and take a look at our Jenkins Java options, now they are similar. Again, the var cache is different, which is in this case fine and okay. And then if we take a look now finally at our Jenkins home directory, notice there isn't a Jenkins home directory because now those match. Also, our user doesn't show up here. We can see the comments that were around the Jenkins user, but again, it doesn't show up here specifically because it's already been set. I mean, we can see comments here, but we don't actually see the Jenkins _user. So at this point, I'm confident that my sysconfig file for CloudBees Core OC is correct. So now we have a few extra things to do. In my case, I'm specifying my own temp dir, but that means I also have to create that temp dir myself. When the Operations Center starts up, it won't create that for me. So I'll just go ahead and make dir var cache CloudBees Core OC temp. That's the directory that I want that to exist. Next up, we need to go ahead and correctly permission everything. So I have my chown-r, Jenkins-OC, Jenkins OC, my varlib Jenkins OC, which is the Jenkins home directory, my var log, so the log directory, var cache CloudBees Core OC, which we have a lot of things under var cache, etc sysconfig, and our user bin CloudBees Core OC. So we'll go ahead and change the permissions on everything there. And then finally, since I am using systemd to control the service, I need to go ahead and create my override file. So I'm going to go ahead and say systemctl edit CloudBees Core OC. Now this file will be blank and that's fine, but I'm going to go ahead and paste in. Again, this came from the comments that were in our sysconfig file. I'm going into the service block and I'm setting the user equal to Jenkins-OC. So we'll go ahead and save this. Again, this is an override file. So that way when upgrades happen again in the future, it will always use this override file to replace out that user for me. So I'll go ahead and save this. And just so I can go ahead and verify everything's going to load okay with that, I'm going to say systemctl daemon reload. Now, because the systemctl edit would have taken care of that, I just do it explicitly just so that I know that it works okay. All right, at this point, everything should be okay. If I was to run a systemctl --full status CloudBees Core OC, we're going to see everything should be set up correctly. We see that our drop-in, which is going to be our override file that has the user value of Jenkins-OC is there. Everything's inactive. Everything looks okay. We're confident in what our sysconfig looks like. So let's go ahead and quit out of this and do a systemctl start CloudBees Core OC. And let's go ahead and run our status one more time. We can see here that we're active and running, and we can see the log is starting to progress through a startup process. So now that the service has started, let's go back over into our browser and see what's happening. So we'll quit out of that. We'll go back and click up on the Jenkins that's in the breadcrumb, but that takes us all the way back to our Operations Center. We can see our login. So nothing looks different here. So we'll say admin and log in with the password. And what we can see now up in the upper left-hand corner is we now see CloudBees CI. If we go down into the footer, we'll see CloudBees CI Operations Center 2.346.4.1. If we go ahead and click over to our controller, now notice what happens with the header and the footer there. We still see CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise. That's the CloudBees Jenkins platform version. And we can still see that in the footer as well. So at this point, our Operations Center has been fully upgraded to CloudBees CI, but now we need to go ahead and go do the same thing for our controller. Now, I won't go into as much detail as I did with the Operations Center, but know that everything is pretty much the same except the values change for certain things because this is now a controller and not an Operations Center. We'll still go ahead and go do them all, but I might go a little bit faster. So follow along. So let's go over back to the documentation. This section was for upgrading the Operations Center, but above that was migrating a client controller from CloudBees Jenkins Platform to CloudBees CI. Let's just take a look at it first, and then we'll actually go through it and do the work. So again, we'll stop the instance. We'll install CloudBees CI. This was doing a backup. We're not going to do that. We're going to migrate any of the options from our existing sysconfig to our new sysconfig. Then we'll start the service. Now, what we didn't do over on the Operations Center side is you can go ahead and uninstall the CloudBees Jenkins platform version of the Operations Center, which we should do, but I'm not going to do that right now. Again, you would just do a yum remove. In this case, for the Operations Center, it'd be a yum remove Jenkins-OC or a DNF remove Jenkins-OC. For the controller, it's going to be just yum remove Jenkins. So everything's in place and we're ready to go for our controller. Now remember, step 0, always back up your Jenkins home directory. Always do that. Let's assume magically for a moment that I've already done that. So let's go ahead now and go over into the shell for our controller. And let's first off, remember, we need to stop the service. Well, let's verify the service is running. We'll say ps aux ww grep for Java. We can see here that our Jenkins controller is already running. We can see it from our user lib Jenkins war. So we know it's running. We want to stop it. We'll come back over to the browser just for a second. We'll look at the controllers. We'll click into the controller. We can see it's running. Let's go ahead and stop our controller. Then if we come back into the page and refresh it, we're unable to connect. So we know it's down. In fact, we can verify from our PS that it's really down. I'm going to go ahead and also do a disable just in case the machine gets rebooted for any reason. I don't want that service to come back up ever again. Next up, we need to go ahead and install the version that we're going to need. So let's go back over here to our documentation. Let's go ahead and click into install the client controller. Much like we did for the Operations Center, we'll just click on Fedora. It'll take us down to the section that we need. Now, for some releases, you might need EPEL release, so you might need to do this in case you run into problems when installing the CloudBees Core CM package. So if you run into a problem, it's going to tell you, it's like, hey, you need this. Make sure you've installed EPEL release, and then go back and install CloudBees Core CM. I've already done that on my instance, so I'm not concerned about it. So let's go ahead and copy this. We'll paste in the repo for CloudBees Core CM. We will go ahead and copy the key. Again, if I was following best practices, I would go ahead and do a DNF upgrade here, but I'm not going to do that right now. And then next up, we need to do our DNF install CloudBees Core CM. But remember, much like with the Operations Center, we need to install a specific version. We want the same version that we had running before. So let's go ahead and go back over to our shell. And we're going to paste in DNF install CloudBees Core CM 2.346.4.1. That matches the same version that we had running prior to shutting it down. So let's go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask us, are you sure this is the version you want to install? Verifying it, triple checking it, quadruple checking it. Yes, this is 2.346.4.1. That is really the one I want to install. And then I'm going to say yes. Much like the Operations Center, let's verify and see if this is running or not, because if it is running, we want to stop it. We can see here that it is running. User lib CloudBees Core CM war. So we want to go ahead and stop the process. So we'll say systemctl stop CloudBees Core CM. We'll verify it's actually shut down, and good, it's all gone. So now we can go ahead and make our changes to our sysconfig files. Now this time, instead of showing you the diffs between the Jenkins sysconfig file and the CloudBees Core CM sysconfig file, I'm just going to go ahead and start editing the CloudBees Core CM. If you're curious about the real changes, in my case, it looks almost exactly the same, except one's specific for the Operations Center and one is specific for the controller. So I'm going to say etc sysconfig CloudBees Core CM. Again, our Jenkins home is going to change to varlib Jenkins because that's the value that it was for our controller before. I'm going to go down to our Jenkins user. And much like what we did before, we're going to have to set the permissions, much like we did with our Operations Center. And we're also going to have to create our systemctl edit for the override of the user. But for this case, we'll do that after we're finished making the changes. So there's our Jenkins. Let's go down to our Jenkins Java options, which is right here. We'll go ahead and delete that. Paste in what our value actually is. Now your values may be different and that's okay, but make sure when you bring things over, if you're using something that was already in var cache, or if you're referencing something that was in var cache, you'll want to change that up to point at the new location of var cache CloudBees Core CM. And we can see here for my temp dir, I do have already var cache CloudBees Core CM. So that one's set up. And then I know, in my case, my last change is going to be down at the bottom with Jenkins args. So we'll go inside of Jenkins args and paste in my -- plugin root var cache CloudBees Core CM plugins. So to recap here, I changed Jenkins home, Jenkins user, Jenkins Java options, and then Jenkins args. In your case, you may have other settings that you have to change. You're going to have to diff your existing etc sysconfig Jenkins or against your etc sysconfig CloudBees Core CM. If you're running different operating systems, it may be an etc default if it's a Debian-based system. So again, you're going to have to go through line by line and make any of the changes matching from the CloudBees Jenkins platform version to the CloudBees CI version. Let's go ahead and save this. Just like we did with the Operations Center, I need to go ahead and create my temp dir. So we'll go ahead and paste this in and create that temp dir. We're also going to go ahead and do the chown for all the locations. So I have my Jenkins home directory, my log directory, my var cache directory, my etc sysconfig, and my user bin. All those look good. We'll hit enter. Next up, we need to do our edit for our systemctl. So we'll say systemctl edit CloudBees core CM. Again, we'll go ahead and paste in service and the user. And in this case, the user is going to be Jenkins and not Jenkins OC because this is a controller and not the operations center. That looks okay. We'll save that. Now at this point, we've installed the RPM. We've made our changes to our sysconfig. We added a change to our systemctl. So we should be good to go. So we'll say systemctl start CloudBees core CM. Let's go ahead and check our status. Systemctl -- full status CloudBees core CM. We can see here we had a failure. So let's see what happened here. We have an invalid argument. So I probably copy and pasted something incorrect. So let's take a look at that. So we'll say ps aux ww grep java just to make sure everything's gone. It is. So let's edit our etc sysconfig CloudBees core CM. Jenkins home. I forgot to close out my quote for our libjenkins. So that looks pretty good. Let's save that. Let's assume that was it. We'll say start. And now let's check our status again. Now we have it running fine. So we see fresh logs coming in. Everything looks good there. Let's go ahead and go back over to our controller page and let's refresh this page. And we can see here it's still starting up because it can take a minute or two potentially for you to go ahead and have that controller come back up. Now that we're fully back up and running, we can see up here in the upper left-hand corner, we see CloudBees CI. If we look down in the bottom right-hand corner, we see CloudBees CI client controller. If we go ahead and walk our way back up the breadcrumb and go back to the operations center, we see our operations center here. Then we can click back down into our controller and we can see that the controller, all of that pathing works fine, just like it did prior to the upgrade. We'll go back up one more time and we can see that we do have the correct version of our controller running on the operations center. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBees. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.